All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of Disrupt Your Money. And I am here today with a very exciting guest, one of our clients and community members, Anne Emery of Depict Data Studio. So Anne, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Meg.
Oh my gosh, I'm super pumped for this conversation. So as you're going to learn, Anne is a really inspirational person. She has built an incredible business. Remember, this is video. People can see your face. So this is a really, really incredible business, but she's also done it while I think doing a really great job of balancing family and home and self. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to share Anne's story here today, because I think it's really important as we are talking about building our businesses and building wealth and building or working towards economic equity, that we remember we don't have to always do it. We certainly shouldn't do it at the expense of the things that really matter in life. So, Anne, thank you for being here. I'm just really excited to dive into this conversation.
Great. Well, Meg, you've been my accountant for a couple of years now, so you actually know some very private financial, all my financial details. You and my husband are the only two people on the planet,
Ooh.
But I don't know how much you know about kind of what else I'm up to nowadays. I know it, but maybe you see a little bit on Instagram or a little bit in your weekly money meetings and stuff.
Yeah. No, I don't. I see the numbers and I see the that kind of stuff, but yeah, I don't feel like I have the full story.
So nowadays, 2023, I'm in my 9th year of self-employment and solopreneurship. So I'm not brand new, but I'm not one of those people who's been doing this for decades and decades. I'm kind of in the middle experience-wise. So I figured a good number of things out so far. I mostly do data visualization, consulting, and training, which means all of your spreadsheets that most people hate, except you and me, right? Except people like us, we love our spreadsheets. We geek out over our spreadsheets. I'm mostly helping government agencies, universities, hospitals take their spreadsheets and make sense of them with better graphs and better dashboards. And
by the way, is the only person in the world who has prettier spreadsheets than I do. So.
That's a huge compliment. I'm going to take that as a huge compliment.
I think one of our first meetings, you were like, let me just send you this spreadsheet I made. And I was like, whoa. It was fun. I knew I loved you from that moment.
I love your spreadsheets too, because they're all set up in templates where I can just select my thing from my drop down. It's very neat and tidy. It ensures, anyway, we could geek out about spreadsheets all day. But I think because you've seen my numbers, my take-home pay is quite nice and stable these days. My take-home pay nowadays is about 6 times my old salary when I was a data person in downtown DC by the White House. So like what I made with my master's degree in a great consulting firm, going out on my own little by little, being able to, my goal early on was like, I just want to make $20,000 a year. That was my goal, because that was the gap between my husband's salary and then I had to make $20,000 so that we could just afford our studio apartment in the DC area. And I was like, great, I'm just gonna make $20,000 a year as a self-employed person. And like, to my surprise, it's been much more than 20. Like, what a wild ride, right? Mm-hmm. I work very little. I work during the school day. I've got 3 kids, so I work while they're in school. I go to gymnastics on Monday nights. I go to the art class on Thursdays. I can take them to their haircuts. I get to do like midday playground breaks. If I'm bored or tired, like, let me go with my husband, who's a stay-at-home dad, and the son to the playground. Like, why not? I have that flexibility now. Mm-hmm. As you probably know, kids are sick all winter long. So whether I want to work part-time or not in the winter, right. I've had to work part-time, but like, what a blessing, right? Because a lot of corporate jobs don't give you much sick time at all. And then the latest thing I've added is that I'm taking the summers off. So I kind of started that a few years ago, and I've built up to just going for it the full 3-month summer that my kids are home from elementary school. So this year we're doing 2 months in Europe. We're going to do 4 different cruises. Like, life is nice these days in year 9 of self-employment.
And I love that you shared that. So thank you, because I think that is really inspirational for a lot of people. But I also know that there are going to be people sitting there going, well, yeah, but there's something about her that makes it, oh, she comes from a wealthy family, or, oh, she's this, or, oh, she's that. You didn't start out with that on day one. And so can you talk a little bit about how you got to this spot? Because I think it's really important that people understand, no, we're not saying you can have this tomorrow. we're saying
Yeah.
there's absolutely a journey here, but it is possible. So I'd love to hear a
Yeah.
little bit about what that journey was like for you.
I don't have a rags to riches story. My parents, they did that. So they were the first ones in their families to go to college. But then I got the luxury of being raised in the DC area with college educated parents who both worked full time. I went to great public schools and everything. So like I did absolutely have that massive advantage in life. And then I did the typical path, right? Like you go to college, you graduate. I started working in my first corporate job. And they were like, great, you get, what did I get? The first benefits package. It was like 10 days of vacation and 5 days of sick leave or something. I mean, it was nothing. It's what you get your first year in a company. And I don't think I've told you this, but my mom got cancer almost as soon as I got that job. She had cancer 4 different times. And when they're like, you only have 5 days of sick leave, I just thought, but that means I can't even be with her when she's going to surgery, and I can't even be with my dad to help him take care of my mom. And it just wasn't enough. And I just instantly thought, this is not working. Like this system's going to break me. And I was instantly burned out, at the age of 22, 23, instant quarter life crisis of just thinking like, this can't be all there is. This just can't be all there is. Like there was no time off, just working around the clock. I think a lot of people can relate to that. I think we all, unfortunately, had jobs early on, and maybe even now, a lot of us have those types of jobs for a long time, unfortunately, where it's just like really soul sucking and just no time for your personal life.
Yeah. I mean, my last corporate job, I was pregnant and I had my son, and I came back and I would have to leave the office at 4 just to get home to get him by daycare before they start charging you. But if I left at 4, my boss, would ream me out for it. I had a grandfather who was sundowning at the time. So if I wanted to see him when he was still able to engage, I had to leave at 3. I mean, it didn't work. And I constantly felt like I was shuttling myself from one obligation to another and never feeling like I was completely there for any of them. And I hated it. And it was a big part of why I left. So I think a lot of us can relate.
I think it's really hard for the high achieving people too, which is like a lot of the people that we know and work with, because you know what you're capable of. And it's just, I feel like we have all these external factors then that just, they just felt like really heavy on my shoulders for a while. Like, I know I can do better work than this. I know my family, my mom at the time, or my kids now deserve better than that. And I just like couldn't do that. Just the environment wasn't set up for me to actually do my best at anything. And that, I mean, I know my perfectionist tendency is my own problem, but like a lot of us deal with that. Where you're like, I'm just not performing well on either end. Like I'm just sucking at everything right now, basically.
Yeah. Well, it's survival. It feels like we're just working to survive. And it's, we talk a lot on this show about, what we're trying to achieve, which is economic equity and wealth building and all of that. But there are so many factors that are making it harder for us to achieve that. And I think sometimes we have to be willing to step outside of the box and recognize that the current systems that are set up just don't work for us. I tried really hard to make corporate work for me, and it just didn't.
I was thinking this is where I could say some fancy success story, right? And be like, don't worry, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. But actually, well, I told you, I graduated college and it was just soul sucking corporate life. I loved my coworkers. We worked on great projects, but it was just the structure I was in. And then I decided, let me start grad school part-time. Let me add that in the mix. And my initial dream was go to a PhD full-time, do the professor track. That was life plan A. But I couldn't afford it because I had to pay for it all myself. I didn't even have $1,000 extra to like apply to the grad school programs. I had to work and I had to go to school part-time. No, I take that back. I could have taken out loans, which is what all my friends did. A lot of my friends had, 50, 100,000 or more of loans, but I was also married at the time, and I was like just so terrified of doing that to my husband and I's finances. So luckily I didn't take out grad school loans, and I just did one or two classes at a time, which was all I could afford. It was like, oh, I've got $4,000 extra. Great. That's one class. Oh, we just got annual bonuses. Now I can take two classes this semester. And I just pieced it together, and I had super slow grad school for 5 years of driving around the Beltway in DC, like go to work, go to class at night, get home at 11 o'clock, have to study on the weekends. It was not glamorous. It was not my ideal way to spend my 20s, but you know, I did it, and I thought, never again will I live like this, because it was so challenging. It was just so much harder than it needed to be.
So how did you make the leap then from 5 years of grad school, which good. I just finished paying off my second to last grad school loan. I have one more. So I really appreciate that. But how did you go from that to becoming a business owner?
Well, around the same time, I'd been speaking at conferences for part of my day job. I would just go assist my boss or assist somebody more senior on the team and, you know, help them with the presentations. So I was getting that speaking experience, which was great. I was also, this was back in the early 2010s, like 2011, 2012 era, when YouTube and blogging were just starting to be a thing. Podcasts weren't like really a thing yet. Online courses weren't a thing. It was YouTube and blogging back then. So I started YouTubing and blogging just for fun. And I got lucky, like right around spring 2014, just as I was finishing grad school. It was like all the stars aligned. And I was at a conference speaking about dashboards, which buzzwords and data come and go. But at the time, this was peak dashboard mania. Everybody wanted to hear about dashboards. I didn't know that. I had no idea. Like, I'd only been to a few conferences. I had no sense that this was this really fancy topic everybody wanted to learn about. So my coworker and I are giving this presentation to a standing room only crowd. They're not here to hear Anne. They weren't here to hear from my coworker. Like, she's brilliant, but they were just there to hear about the topic. And immediately that same day, I started getting emails from people at the conference saying, and I'd look at my phone during the conference, what is happening? What is going on with my phone blowing up? And people would say, that was an amazing presentation. You just did such a great job explaining dashboards and what they're for and how to make them better. Can we fly you out to give the same presentation at our company? Or can you do a webinar at our company? Can you do a whole 5-day workshop on that? And it just was the topic that kind of started everything. And I said no to those requests at first because I still had, you know, a few more months of grad school left. I was like, I have zero time. Like, I have no sick time to take. Like, I can't do that. It was a conflict with my current job anyway. But then once I did finish my grad school program, I was like, let me say yes to some of these paid speaking events. And the first one I actually said yes to was in Uganda. It was a woman from Germany who was doing an international development project in Uganda, kind of like our version of USAID. Yeah. And she read my blog and she said, your blog is so helpful, really practical data tips. Can we fly you out to train all of our analysts in Uganda who crunch numbers for parliament? And it was like my people in Uganda. It was like my DC analyst mindset people who crunch numbers for Congress. It was like those exact same personality types who just happened to be in Kampala, Uganda. So I did that. It was a 2-day class that paid more than my monthly salary at my job. Wow. So I do the rough math and I'm like, if I just did one workshop a month, I would make my old salary. And then I thought, well, I told you I really only needed to make 20,000. So I thought, well, I'll just do like a few projects and there's $20,000. And like, I guess I'll just do nothing the rest of the time. Maybe I'll ride a bike. I don't know what I'll do. And it turns out you actually just work full time or whatever hours you want. And then you just make more than your old salary. And it just like is this perfect math equation that works out in your favor when you do consulting like this.
But what I love about this is that you weren't necessarily you weren't set out to build this business, right? You were just doing your thing but you were open to this opportunity. And I think that that's really important for folks who are not currently in the business world, or even if you are in the business world, to just always be open to whatever opportunity may come your way, because you never know who you talk to, what event you go to. That could be this massive opening for the next part of your life. And so I love that. So, all right. So you got the one. What happened? Did you make the 20K in the first year?
I made my full salary the first year, more than
Wow.
20K,
Wow.
and take home pay, because I had to make more than that, because I had, what were my business expenses at the time? Like maybe I bought myself a laptop. I mean, it was nothing. I was working out of a little tiny desk, which I've told you about because I deducted it on taxes back in the day. I was like,
Yeah.
I told my H&R Block person at the time, they were like, what's the square footage of your office? It's like, I live in a studio apartment. We have 600 square feet. My desk is 4 by 5 feet. Like, can I just deduct that, you know? So it's not like I had a lot of business expenses, but the first year I did make my full salary, which, I realize is actually really rare. Like some people do that, but not everybody does that. Many people need a few years to get up and running to more of a break even point. That's the much more normal path. And I did have those few years to get up and running. I had kind of accidentally was doing YouTube videos and blogs and speaking at conferences for fun or as part of my regular job. So I absolutely did have those ramp up years. They were just not on purpose, you know. And nowadays people ask me like, how do you get started blogging? How do you get started YouTubing? And they put so much pressure on themselves thinking like, I want to turn my podcast, TikTok channel, whatever, into a full-time job. How do I do that? And like, I have no advice there. Hopefully people aren't listening to the podcast for that, because mine was this happy accident.
Yeah.
And I kind of think it had to be, because if I went in thinking like, I'm going to master YouTube and I'm going to write the best blog posts ever and make a living off this, it almost would have been too much pressure, and it probably wouldn't have worked out as successfully as it did. So I don't know, just ramp up years are totally normal. If you can get some ramp up years while you still have the, you know, the safety net of a full-time job, that's absolutely my recommended route for sure.
Well, and I think you gave advice there, which is to just start. I think people do spend so much time fixated on how do I do it? And I mean, we've talked about this before, I think, with people who make online courses and they spend 8 months, 10 months, 12 months building the thing. And it's like, just start. Like people are so afraid to just leap into it. In fact, I got my start in this business. I was running another business and people were asking finance questions. And I was like, okay, I know the answer to this. This is so easy. And I started blogging and I started answering people's questions. And I never, in fact, the time I said, I'm never doing taxes ever again, I swore up and down I would never touch it, because I hated it before, because what I really hated was the environment and not the work itself. And so, but you just start. All right. So how did that first year transition into 9 years later? We're not working in the summers. We're not working a lot during the week, and we're making a ton of money. What does that look like?
Right around the same time that I finished grad school, left the corporate world, started doing consulting and training for my job. I was going to say a side job, but it kind of accidentally became my job. My husband and I said, you know what? We're almost both 30. It's time to start a family. So then we threw kids into the mix. So I think I got pregnant a month after I became self-employed. I mean, it was really quick. We didn't think it would happen that fast. I thought, oh, it'll take a year, like the story that all my friends have. And it's just like, oh my gosh, this is happening now. Which was really hard, because raising a baby, especially if it's your first one, is the most challenging thing I think on the planet. So is starting a business. And I did those at the same time, which was really, really hard. But I'm also really glad it worked out that way, because then it forced me to build a business that supported my parenthood goals. Like I had to build a business that fit family in, where a lot of my friends now, like in their 30s, 40s, 50s, are like, okay, I already have kids. I want to go be self-employed. And that's hard. That's hard. My heart goes out to them, because it's like, it's just different. You know how hard kids are because you already have them. So then to work that into self-employment, that's a little trickier. So I kind of got lucky and just went right in the deep end and did some of life's hardest things at the same time that very first year.
So what were some of the things that you did to balance business with family? Because that is it's something I struggle with. It's definitely something I know most of our community struggles with, whether it's kids or relatives or just whatever. We all have something that needs our time.
Yeah. There are probably two very intentional things I did early on. One of them's realistic for everybody in the audience. One of them's maybe not, or maybe it's more specific to mine. Anyway, one is I purposefully looked for short-term projects with clients. I had one of those 12-month contracts of working maybe 20-ish hours a month. And that doesn't work when you're also pregnant and taking care of a newborn. It was just, and I have friends who are like, oh, I've had to hire a helper and I've had to hire this person. And there are absolutely ways to deal with it. Parents deal with that all the time.
Yeah.
But I just thought that sounds so stressful to me. I'm just only going to do short-term projects, which is one of the reasons that over the years, I started with doing half consulting, like I'll write your report, I'll crunch your numbers, I'll make your graphs. And I was doing half training, like full day workshops or 2-day workshops. And I purposefully focused on training because it was all short term. So I knew like, oh, if I'm pregnant and I'm going to be 8 months or 9 months pregnant when this client wants this workshop, I'll just have to decline. I'll have to like wait I just planned it around my pregnancies. So I don't know how realistic that is in every industry, but in my industry of doing a speaking and consulting, it's very realistic to just say, I'm only doing short-term projects so that you're not committed to stuff too long-term. And then you have something with life come up and you're like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And
what was the other one? You said you have two. Yeah.
The other one I started doing was really early on with my first baby. I started taking field trip Fridays. Her daycare we got so lucky. They let you do 4 days a week instead of 5. I would have never paid for 5, but not taken her on Fridays. I don't even think I would do that now. I just think that's financially like unreasonable because daycare is wildly expensive. But ours let us pay for 4 days a week. So I just took off Fridays and we just drove everywhere within an hour of our house. So we went to the zoos, we went to the museums, we did all the children's centers, we did play dates. And that was just so nice. Not that she remembers any of it. She was like 6 months. She was 18 months at the time, but I remember it. I have those really good memories of us bonding. And I just am so glad I made the leap and did that for myself early on, was just saying like, I'm just going to fit my work into 4 days and I'm going to have a full day devoted to families where I'm not checking my phone unless there's some fire I had to put out, which is very rare. But like, I'm mostly just, mentally present for my kids on field trip Fridays.
I love that. I do a similar thing. I generally don't work on Fridays. And again, if something comes up, I'll do it. But I like it actually for me. Maybe this makes me sound bad. I don't spend time with my family. I use it for myself.
That's not bad at all. You have to. When else are you going to go to the dentist and get a haircut? Like, that stuff takes time.
I do. I use it. I play tennis. I get a massage. Like I use it for, not every week, but I use it for, I try to do at least one thing every Friday. That's kind of a self-care thing. Because it is so important. And I just, and it came out of when I was in corporate, I never functioned well on Fridays. I really struggled every Friday to be productive. So when I was in this business, I was like, well, then why am I working on Fridays? If that's not a day when I'm not going to be productive, let's just call it what it is. I'm so much better working harder Monday through Thursday and recognizing that about myself. And that's what I love about being self-employed is I can adjust my schedule that way. I do calls on Tuesdays and Wednesdays because on Mondays, I need to just focus. I don't talk to anybody on Monday. Don't talk to me on Monday. On Thursdays, my brain is shut down enough where I can't have a conversation with a person. So it's nice to be able to design your life the way that works the best.
I was having a very similar conversation with a self-employed friend just last week, and she was debating switching her, and she has a small team. There's maybe 5 of them in her company. She was debating moving the whole company to a 4-day work week because she'd heard such promising results. There's been like this study here and this study there, especially in Europe, of how much more effective and productive and happy and rested and more healthy you are if you don't work 1 billion hours a week. Like, duh, right? Americans are just finally catching up and realizing this like the rest of the world. And I was telling my friend last week, I said, my brain, I can only be on beast mode, like in the zone, focused, working in my zone of genius. I can only do that about 20 hours a week, about 8 months out of the year. And that's when I work. I only work when I'm on. I could work year round on mediocre mode. Part-time beast mode, full-time mediocre mode. You get the same done work-wise either way. You get the same done. But when you work part-time on beast mode, you have so much more time for tennis. Like I go bike riding. I'm into my plants. I've got my garden in the backyard that deserves my attention, you know, like I can do that a couple hours a day if I want.
Yeah.
So it's not really a trade-off because like you said, none of our brains are best on Friday mornings. Everybody's got ebbs and flows to their energy. So I think that's the beauty of working for yourself is that maybe not on day one, but over time, you can very purposefully craft your schedule. So you're only working when your brain is on. And like if I find myself scrolling social media nowadays, I'll just stop and say like, what am I even doing at my desk? I should be playing with my kids right now. I should be exercising. Yeah. There's just no point of being at my computer unless I'm like doing something that matters.
Well, and I think that is critical right there. I've recently started to tune into that so much more, which is what I'm doing right now the most beneficial thing? It doesn't mean I have to be producing something for work, but is it the best thing overall in my life? So if I'm scrolling social media, is this really the best thing for me right now? Probably not. I could be doing something else. And same thing with work. If I hit a point where I'm like, I am not being productive right now, I'm not going to sit there and force myself to be productive. I'm going to get up, go for a walk, have some lunch, take a break, whatever it may be. And that I think is how we get to build these businesses that you're talking about by actually working less in a sense, which feels very counterintuitive and is certainly against the message that we've been taught our entire lives and that society pounds into us. So I'm really glad to hear you talk about that. And I also want to point out, because this may be surprising to a lot of folks listening, you don't have a big team. Because I think some people might be sitting there going, oh, sure, she can do that because I'm sure her team takes. No, you don't. In fact, who is on your team?
So a few years ago, I went to a conference and I heard a lot of other creator and solopreneur types talking about virtual assistants, which I had kind of heard of, but I just thought, oh, that doesn't apply to me. Like, I don't know. It didn't seem relevant, but I just kept hearing people say virtual assistant, virtual assistant, virtual assistant. So I go home from the conference the next week and I hire one. I had 2 different virtual assistants for about 2.5 or 3 years, and they were great. They were great for a while, for a season. I think they would work between 5 and 10 hours a week, not both at the same time. Like I had one virtual assistant and then I had another virtual assistant, and they helped with all of the administrative tasks, which is different for every business. Like some things that I would call administrative tasks, you in a past money meeting have called a CEO day, or somebody else did. Like, no, that's not admin stuff. And that's actually really important CEO paperwork. I was like, so I've had to trick myself into realizing that everything is administrative. I just think either I'm making graphs or I'm teaching about graphs, and everything else is like blah. I don't want to do it. So basically anything that wasn't my favorite thing, I tried to offload as much as possible on a virtual assistant. So that was great for a few years. But then I also, at the same time, I started purchasing software and technology to save time. Like, oh gosh, I'm going to say the name wrong on air. It's either Zapier or Zapier.
I have no idea. We use it. We use it in our business all the time. And to this day, I still have no idea. And I'm constantly calling it something different.
Okay. Well, for people listening, go to Zapier, Zapier/Zapier. And what it does is it connects all your other platforms. So I want to say my package is maybe $20 a month, and it replaces like 20 hours a month of VA time for me. So I started purchasing things. Like I have this workflow where for client workshops, they register through a Zoom registration page, and then Zapier enrolls them in a Teachable course. So they also get the recordings of their private trainings. Gumroad sends them all of their digital supplemental materials like chart templates and ebooks and handouts. ConvertKit sends them welcome messages, friendly reminder messages. So I set that all up, which takes, because I've done it a billion times, takes like 25 to 30 minutes. Like I can just knock it out when I'm on beast mode. When I'm on beast mode, I just knock it out. I kind of set that up for I set that up for an upcoming client training, and then Zapier just does its magic in the background for only $20 a month, which as far as software goes is pennies for how much time it saves. So I started doing things like that. And just over the years, I thought I've kind of eliminated any recurring tasks. I've eliminated a lot of administrative tasks. I just didn't need a virtual assistant anymore. So my team now is I need higher level support. I need like strategic, super highly skilled specialists. So I have thankfully finally got a real accountant, you finally, that was years overdue. You convinced me, even though I was super stubborn, thank you for sticking with me, to upgrade my Excel spreadsheet of all my projects my invoices that I was manually doing, hating every second of it. I finally have an accounting system, which saves hours. How many hours does that save? I just don't have to work full time anymore because like Zapier and you and my accounting system and a couple other time savers, like it does all the work for me because I've purposefully structured it that way. I'm trying to make as much as possible automatic about my work.
Yeah. And I love that, because I think if there's any hope of us accomplishing the big things we want to accomplish in this world, we have to get smarter and tighter about how we work. And, I'm a mom, I'm a business owner, I'm in politics, I'm involved in the community. There's so many things. And I often get this question of like, how do you do it all? I don't do it all. I figure out a way to outsource it, whether that's to a tool or a person or a team or something. But I love in your case that you didn't automatically outsource it to a team. I know you got a VA, but it's not like you built out this big team, which your business numbers could certainly handle. But that wasn't your knee-jerk reaction, which it is for many of us, because it's what we're constantly told. In order to grow, in order to scale, you must build a team. You need a team. And I just love with you, you were like, well, let me see about that. Do I really have to do it that way, or can I do it a different way? And I think knowing you, the way you've chosen to do it is more aligned with who you are anyway, and your style. I think you would not love, we've talked about this, you would not love having a big team, because that would add more of that burden, that weight to your shoulders. So I just love that you've done it that way.
The one piece of the equation of my trajectory that we haven't talked about yet is that I used to travel full time for work as a digital nomad and brought the family along, which we can talk about. That's a whole like really juicy part of the story. Yeah. But you and I were in the same business coaching program for a while, which was a great program. But I remember the focus of that program was like build a team, get subcontractors, get full-time employees, preferably, was a big push. And I was in this coaching program for a year, 2 years or something. And I kept hearing this message of how effective it was to hire, and, work in your zone of genius, work on the thing that only you can do, and don't do anything else. Like that part made total sense to me. Like, why am I trying to do my own taxes when that's Meg's zone of genius? Why am I trying to send invoices when there's a software program that handles almost all of that for me for like pennies a month? And I just didn't like this idea of having a team. It just didn't fit. And I worried a lot that I was self-sabotaging myself, to be honest. I worried, is this really the right path for everybody? And I think like, oh, this doesn't apply to me. Like I'm special and different, and the like kind of snowflake problem. Yeah. And I really don't think having a team applies to me, because I told you I used to do a mix of training and consulting. Well, my trainings were all over the world. So like I mentioned, I went to Uganda. Well, I've been to like a dozen other countries. I would zigzag back and forth in airports. I was on the road every single week, like every single week. And even within the US, I would do like Chicago one day, get on a plane, go to Pittsburgh the next day, then go to Miami, then go back to the DC area. I've just went like boom, boom, boom all over, which was great pre-kids. Yep. But then you add on 1 and 2 and then 3 kids, and you also have a husband you'd like to see, and it wasn't practical anymore. And it also wasn't practical because how could I possibly manage a team when I'm in different time zones and I'm in airports? Like going to Africa is like a 40-hour flight. So I remember I would be standing in line, or even going to I used to work with the UN in Geneva a bunch of times. I went there 4 or 5 times, and like I'd be standing in line ready to step on the airplane, like waiting for my zone to be called. And I'd be furiously thumb typing on my phone, trying to upload attachments on the terrible airport Wi-Fi, like sending people things to meet client deadlines. And it just didn't make any sense. It was just so much work. It was so much stress. I would land and have a full inbox from all these projects. It just didn't make any sense at all. So I did try like subcontracting and having more of an agency model for a while. Yeah. But combining that with traveling to all the different time zones didn't make any sense at all. I love it just being me responsible for everything, plus my software programs and like high level support that I hire.
Just Anne and her software and her Excel spreadsheet.
It's so simple this way. It's just so simple.
I love it. Well, all right. I do want to dive into the digital nomad thing because I think this is a really interesting part of your story. So talk to us a little bit about what that looks like, and also this idea of taking your family on the road. Because I know more and more people are thinking about ways to travel and to spend time with their families in non-traditional ways. I'm seeing more people do the thing where they're doing road trips. In fact, I talked to somebody who said last summer I road tripped with my daughter for 3 months. Why not? Like I realized I could do it. Why not for the summer? So I'd love to hear a little bit about what that looked like for you and your family.
Yeah. So let's see, where are we timeline wise? So 2014, finish grad school, get pregnant with the first kid, start my own company. By 2018, we had baby 2. So I'd already kind of been working for a while. The income's growing a little bit. I'm learning about retirement. I'm putting a ton of money into retirement, like every extra penny. We're still living pretty frugally to try to kind of catch up on the retirement savings that we certainly didn't do in our 20s and should have. So I'm like getting all the pieces together, right? Kind of building the foundation to have a really solid future someday, but we weren't there yet. And the frequent travel I told you was like great pre-kids. It was super glamorous pre-kids. Like, oh, I'll just have a glass of wine in the airport and then I'll just, go to a nice dinner when I arrive in the city. But when you have kids, I was just homesick the whole time. And I was just wanted to be home as soon as possible. So I'd fly in and out really fast. And it was just awful. So by the time we knew baby 2 was coming, my husband and I were like, I can't do this with 2 kids. Like, I'm going to miss them too much. I don't want to miss them all the time. This isn't fun anymore. Like, something's got to give. And this was pre-pandemic, right? So this was before things were virtual, or before groups I worked with were open to doing trainings virtual. Yeah. Things were still very much like in person. Like conferences were almost all in person, like in person. A lot of the technology for doing virtual work just hadn't been invented yet. So we thought this felt really logical at the time. Okay. And in hindsight, I'm like, what were we thinking? We said, rather than me flying to a city, coming back home, flying to another city, coming back home for 24 hours, rather than doing that, we'll just sell our house. My husband will just quit his job. He worked for the FBI for a decade. Like this was a big decision. We were giving up his pension. We were giving up like his whole career that he had worked hard to build himself. We'll just take our kids out of daycare. He'll just be a stay-at-home dad now. We'll just not have a car anymore. We had like 2-3 cars at the time. We'll just not have any of that. And we'll just live out of carry-on luggage and we'll go wherever mommy's job takes us. And that felt really logical at the time. Oh, there's a solution. Like, I don't have to be homesick. My kids and husband will just come with me. So yeah, we did that. We spent a few months right after my second daughter was born. My first daughter had like heart issues and a heart defect and she had all the surgeries and everything. So we had to make sure the second kid was like not needing heart surgeries. She wasn't. So we immediately got to work selling pretty much everything. We had a storage closet with quilts that our moms had made, like the sentimental items, and maybe I had like, I don't know, a bag of kids' toys or something that we could go to the storage unit and swap things out as we needed to, as they developmentally needed different toys. And that for a year in 2019 was amazing. That was amazing. It was so great. And then, there's a pandemic. What are we going to do now? So we decided to stop traveling because I took all the public health guidance. I work at the CDC all the time. I took that very seriously. I thought, okay, we need to stay home and keep our germs to ourselves and not go infect everybody else. So we rented an Airbnb outside Orlando, loved it, put an offer in on a house a month later when the prices were super low. Imagine house prices in April 2020, we got under asking. Yeah. It's crazy inflation since then, but we at least that worked to our favor with everything else going wrong and us having no place to live for a while. And nowadays the digital nomad lifestyle is a lot more common. Maybe not with kids. That's much more rare. I do see a lot more people doing it now. I highly recommend it. If people are on the fence, it is difficult with kids though, for sure.
Well, what I love about what you did is you did it, you had a great experience from it, but you also recognized when it wasn't working anymore for, in your case, a global health pandemic reason, but for any of us, it could be any reason. And I think that's what is really great about your story is at every point you were both open to opportunity and also recognizing what I've been doing up to this point was great, but now I have to pivot in a different way. And that's okay. It's not a failure. It's just a course correction. And that's a really great thing to be aware of.
It's funny because I feel like personality types like mine and yours, I think it's a data spreadsheet thing. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's just a high achieving type A personality thing, but I do like to plan everything. Mm-hmm. I love planning. I don't have like specific like monthly goals and quarterly goals, but I generally have a plan for what I'm going to do. So when things happen and throw my plan off, like that is extremely stressful. So I've just tried to be kind of open to, like you said, just open to opportunities to see what comes up. This morning, a woman from Tanzania emails me and she's like, hey, can you come train our global public health partners in Tanzania? It would be 6 days of training. So I'm like texting my husband, like he's downstairs. I don't like to holler down the stairs. I'm like, do you want to go see Mount Kilimanjaro for a week? And he's like, how are we going to take the first grader out of school? I'm like, we'll deal with those. What is she going to learn in first grade?
Right.
Is as helpful to her overall education as a human being, like as going to Africa with mommy for a week or something. So I just kind of like see what happens and just try to say yes to a lot of good things that have come my way.
I love that. And I think that's a really good message because I am very much like you. I'm a planner. I get stressed when things change. But I think that's a really good reminder because the only way, I shouldn't say the only way, but the way that we will achieve what we want to achieve is to be open to these things and is to believe that what life looks like tomorrow is very different than what life looks like today. Because I think so many of us feel stuck in our current situation, no matter what that is. And we can either stay stuck or we can be open to whatever tomorrow brings. So I think it's a perfect message and I think a perfect way to end this incredible conversation. So thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful for you sharing your story and all the great tips that you shared, all the tidbits throughout. I would love to help shout you out. Where can folks find you if they want to learn more about you, want to invite you to Tanzania? How do people do that?
I'm very easy to find online if people Google Ann K. Emery, and LinkedIn is where I mostly hang out. So if people are on LinkedIn and want to connect, go for it. We can definitely connect. You don't need to write a message or anything like that. I will absolutely connect with everybody on LinkedIn.
I love it. Perfect. Well, Ann, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to everyone for being a part of this conversation. And we'll see you back here next week for another episode of Disrupt Your Money.